All right. ESPN reporter Mike Coppinger tweeted late on Wednesday that Tim Tszyu will fight Keith Thurman on March 30th in Las Vegas for the first headline bout on PBC on Prime. It's believed to be a pay-per-view card, and fight fans might not be too happy with the lineup as well. Co-main event should be interesting. Roy Romero versus Esa Cruz. And then boxing scene, also reporting that Erislandy Lara and Michael Zerafa will fight for the WBA middleweight title on that same card. All right, Paulie, is this a good start for PBC on Prime with this card and for it being on pay-per-view as well?
On pay-per-view, no. I don't think this is a pay-per-view card. I don't understand why they would start on pay-per-view with really no big U.S. pay-per-view, competitors there. Your draws. You have Keith Thurman, who's a pretty known entity, but hasn't fought in 2 years, and he's kind of dropped out of the curiosity for a lot of boxing fans and a lot of people. So he's not going to really draw any casuals either because he hasn't really been active. Tim Tszyu, I think, is a potential big star in boxing, and as time goes by, he's a big star in Australia already. He's got the right last name with his father being a Hall of Famer, but in the U.S., he still hasn't got enough notoriety. I don't know. I would think if you'd want to build him up to a pay-per-view star, you'd probably want to keep moving him in main events on non-pay-per-view fights, where you could kind of build up his star power, because I think Tim Tszyu has the kind of star power ability if you know how to move it right. I don't think this is the way. I don't think people are going to pay money out of their pocket for a guy that they haven't really heard about or don't know about yet. He is good, but it's just, I don't think it's a pay-per-view. Thurman, the co-main event with Romero and Cruz, again, a solid fight. But again, is this something that goes on pay-per-view? Lara and Zerafa, again, pretty good fight, but is this really something that needed to be on pay-per-view? This could easily have been a regular Prime card. You start everything out with a bang on regular Prime. Remember when PBC started, everything was free, right? It went to NBC. They came out with a big card. What was the card on NBC when they first started that? It was Thurman versus Guerrero at the time, right?
Thurman Guerrero.
It sounds like I think that was
Danny Garcia was on the card
as
well, maybe.
And so, you got Thurman opening up again now, but this time he hasn't fought in 2 years, and really he's dropped out of the curiosity. And he's not even a light middleweight, which is what the fight is going to be fought at. Actually, it's a non-title fight at 155 pounds, if I'm not mistaken. So, leaving a little bit to be desired. It's a solid card if it wasn't pay-per-view, because if it's going to be pay-per-view, you're not going to develop any more following, any extra following. You're just trying to, recycle the same old thing. You're not doing anything new that basically you say, okay, this hasn't worked. Let's try something new. I think you need to try a little something new. Maybe give this on regular Amazon. Amazon is a subscription network as it is already, just like HBO and Showtime were. So leave it on there and start this thing out the right way, I think. But when you put it on pay-per-view, I think you're just starting to leave a bad taste in people's mouths. I would have personally liked to start with something. If you're going to go pay-per-view, you got to go with pay-per-view fighters, right? I know Tank Davis, a lot of times I've criticized some of the pay-per-view opponents that he's had, but really, at this point, he's a pay-per-view guy. I would have opened this up with a Gervonta Davis versus Frank Martin kind of fight. Now, that would have been something that you could at least justify a pay-per-view, being that Gervonta has been a pay-per-view guy. Frank Martin would be a bona fide threat opponent at lightweight. It would be a world title fight. It has, and then the co-main events, the undercard could be exactly the same. And this is not a knock on Tszyu. This is not a knock on Thurman. I just don't think that's a pay-per-view main event. I think it's a decent fight, but I don't think it's a pay-per-view main event.
Chris, what do you make of this card for PBC, the first one on Amazon Prime?
Listen, I actually like the card. I don't hate the card at all, but I agree with the champ about the idea that it's pay-per-view. Also, if the schedule wasn't so cryptic in that they were waiting to the very last moment to let you know what the fight was going to be, or if we knew that there was more fights already scheduled down the line, it wouldn't bother me as much. Since they waited to the 11th hour to announce what the fight's going to be, and then it's this matchup where literally, like you said, there's not a single bona fide pay-per-view star on the card. And even the matchups that are made, Roy Romero, Esa Cruz, good fight. But we were talking about Romero fighting Devin Haney. Yeah. We were talking about fighting Ryan Haney, Ryan Garcia. Yeah. Ryan Haney. So we got the Ryan Haney situation versus Rolly, and now we got Esa Cruz instead. So when you start talking about fighting either Devin Haney or Ryan Garcia, and that's the fight that everyone's talking about, and then you slip in Esa Cruz in the 11th hour once again, it's like, all right, well, it bothers you.
Personally, I like that fight better than Ryan Garcia. I think this is actually
but in terms of pay-per-view, this won't sell as well.
Yeah, but then you wouldn't be able to put Ryan.
Like I said,
you know what it is?
I like the whole card.
You would have been better off making Rolly versus Ryan, the pay-per-view headliner. Not because it's a great fight. I
Ryan
think Rolly versus Cruz is a better fight, actually, but because of Ryan's pay-per-view ability.
That's my entire point.
Yeah,
There's no one on the card,
Yeah.
and there's no individual, like you said, like Gervonta, like you don't like his past pay-per-view opponents, but he's a pay-per-view guy.
Yeah.
Keith Thurman was a pay-per-view guy once upon a time, but he's 2.5 years out of the ring. He's also fighting in a new weight class.
Yeah.
And Tim Tszyu, who I believe will be a bona fide pay-per-view star eventually, is not right now. So it's all the other variables that make this fight, this card, not great, and why people are giving so much pushback right now, and why we are as well. But all in all, I actually like the card.
Yeah.
Only guy that's going to have a long layoff like that and still be on pay-per-view and people not going to complain, Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
Mike Tyson came right back on pay-per-view after 3.5 years off. Nobody blinked.
And Keith Thurman, the last time that he's been in any kind of headlines recently is for some comments with Claressa Shields and fighting her in a benefit event because of the whole male-female situation. Anyway, that's the last time Keith Thurman has been kind of in the
I
news
spoke to Keith during fight week for Crawford Spence, and he was one of those guys who was campaigning to try and get either the winner or the loser, whoever, and giving his points about it. So, but even that was 7, 8, 9 months ago at this point. So really, he really has been out of the scene for quite a bit. And to have him come back as a headline versus a guy like Tim Tszyu, who is a big star in Australia but not globally, it's going to be a tough sell.
Yeah, George, what do you make of this card here for PBC's first one on Amazon Prime?
So they waited all this time. They knew that they had to deal with Amazon Prime, and all the boxing fans are waiting. Everyone waited all this time, waiting for an announcement. They're teasing us last week saying, oh, we've got a date. Here comes an announcement. And this is what they're giving boxing fans? I think it's terrible, especially as a pay-per-view. Keith Thurman the Keith Thurman that hasn't fought in 2 years, he's headlining a pay-per-view. That's the best that PBC can do. I think it's terrible. And by the way, Chris Pauly, answer this question for me. This is a Keith Thurman boxing question. I don't know if you guys know this. Keith Thurman is still rated number 2 by the WBA 147.
Wow.
That's boxing. That's what boxing gives us. And this is what PBC gives us. I've worked production on the production den of things with PBC. They're always notorious for giving fights late, but this is prime. A lot of people are saying this is the same old thing. And Paulie said this is why, networks drop PBC. And this is the first one on Amazon Prime, and it's a pay-per-view, and it's this. Come on, you can't do better than Keith Thurman and Tim Tszyu. You really can't do better than that? I guess not, because that's what they want us to pay for.
Let's talk about that matchup here between Thurman and Tim Tszyu. I mean, we all expect Tim Tszyu is going to be the heavy favorite. Thurman hasn't fought in, 25 months. Is that ring rust, Paulie, is going to be very important. What do we expect from this fight here? What do you think will happen between Tszyu and Thurman?
I think it's a matter of ring rust and also a matter of the intensity that you lose when you're out of the ring too. Tim Tszyu is a pretty intense guy. He's a technical fighter, but he's also intense. He's been active. He's got that killer instinct because he's young. He wants to get it. As you get older, especially as you kind of start to settle into a little bit of a post-retirement life, like Keith Thurman, obviously with a 2-year layoff, is starting to do. He's got married. He's got kids. You soften up sometimes a little bit, especially when you step outside the ring for such a long time. The question is, can he raise his intensity? Because we knew Keith Thurman, when he was younger, was a very intense guy. His fights were very intense. He welcomed that kind of fight. Now, I'm not sure, because ever since really the Josecito Lopez fight a few years ago, I've kind of noticed a little bit of a dip in the intensity of Keith Thurman and his willingness to really just shoot out like that, like a cannon, like with that kind of intensity, that kind of boxing mentality, sort of like he had in the Sean Porter fight and all those fights earlier in his career. And I think as you get older, that just goes away from you more and more. So I don't know, because Tim Tszyu has that mentality. Tim Tszyu has that killer mentality. He has that mentality that he wants to be better. He wants to destroy everything in front of him. He wants to impress every single time he's out there. He's got that killer instinct. So can you match it at this point? And especially, can you match it at 2 years off? And especially, can you match it with a guy naturally bigger than you in his weight class, in a weight class that you really haven't fought at? I mean, Keith Thurman may have had a couple of junior middleweight fights in his careign, right? But I'm not really sure. He's campaigned overall. He's campaigned at welterweight. So he's not a guy who's that size either. So you got a younger, fresher, bigger, more intense guy in Tim Tszyu. And if you're Thurman, you're trying to summon it back, and haven't really shown that you're able to summon it back in recent times. And in recent times, you haven't fought at all.
Yeah, Chris, you think he's going to be competitive in this fight, Thurman against Tim Tszyu?
This looks to me the classic young lion eating the old lion matchup, where you've got a guy who is smaller, is on the back end of his best years, and you got Tim Tszyu, who is being touted as a future star and being paraded that way. This is his entry into the United States marketplace.
Right.
And what better way than to fight a name that the United States marketplace knows, that this side of the world, but also is globally known, and to go out there. He's bigger, he's younger, he's more intense. Thurman's never fought anyone his size. He hasn't been active at all. You mentioned the Josecito Lopez fight. I'm thinking about the Luis Collazo fight where he got hurt bad to the body. Thurman has been hurt by much smaller guys. The last guy he fought was Mario Barrios, coming up from 140, a guy who had been knocked out by Tank, and they went the distance. So now he's moving up again to fight Keith Thurman. I'm sorry, to fight Tim Tszyu. It just seems like it's the writing's on the wall there for what this fight really is. It's the future star against the aging champ.
Yeah, George, what do you make of Thurman and his competitiveness in this fight against Tim Tszyu?
Well, you know what? I don't usually bring up movies, but this just came to my head. This reminds me of The Wizard of Oz. Okay. Because I think Keith Thurman's going to be like the Tin Man. He's going to need people oiling his joints so he can move. Let's not forget that he also got beat by Manny Pacquiao in 2019. Manny Pacquiao was 73 years old when he beat him. Okay? So he got beat in 2019 by an old Manny Pacquiao, got dropped in the first, got hurt to the body. Then he had that not so good fight with Mario Barrios, and now he's moving up to 154. Keith Thurman, though, in all seriousness, he's got a champion's heart and he's got pride, and he doesn't want to lose this fight. He wouldn't have signed if he thought he was going to lose. I just don't see. Nothing points to him winning this fight. Not one thing. Even if you're the biggest Keith Thurman fan, nothing points to him winning this fight, except if you're just a huge fan and you love Keith Thurman and you think he's going to win. I don't think he will win. Tim Tszyu, like the champ said, he's on the rise. He's younger, bigger, stronger. This is a setup fight for Tim Tszyu to win and elevate his star.
All right, let's talk about the co-main, because that might be the most exciting fight on the card there. Roy Romero versus Esa Cruz. All right, Paulie, what do you make of that matchup there between Romero and Cruz?
That one's a pretty dynamite matchup. Again, disagreeing about this whole thing being on pay-per-view, but that's an entertaining fight. Styles make fights. Cruz is a seek and destroy guy, never in a bad fight. And Romero has a wild personality, pretty unorthodox boxing style, can punch, and he knows how to win. I mean, I think sometimes Romero is a bit underrated by people because they look at his antics and they look at just some of the things that happened to him even outside the ring and even in the ring. I think he gets a bad rap for the Barroso fight. I mean, but that Barroso fight doesn't look so bad now with what Barroso's done since. I think this is a good fight, man, and I really have a hard time picking a definitive winner in it. And I think it's going to really entertain, and I think it's going to be some good two-way action.
Yeah, I smell a big fight preview in deep waters here, George, when it comes to this one between Romero and Esa Cruz. All right, Chris, what do you make of this matchup here between Romero and Esa Cruz?
I mean, it came out of left field, but I like it a lot. I think it's a good matchup. Esa Cruz coming up from 135, fighting at 140 for the first time, at least in a major fight. Rolly's, also coming up from 135 in the past. But Rolly's a bigger guy, for sure. I've been around both guys, and Esa Cruz is considerably shorter. And I think that's going to play a role in this fight in terms of the height and the physical matchup. Rolly's a very physical guy, very, very physical. He can be wild at times. He definitely can punch. Obviously better at 35 than at 40. But he can punch, he can box. He's a bit of a wild man out of the ring and also inside the ring in terms of his style. And oftentimes that works out for him. And Esa Cruz is one of those come forward, meet you, and get into a dogfight kind of guy. So I think it's a great style matchup. I think that the timing is good too. I mean, they're both young enough. It's not like we're looking at an old guy and a young guy. And Cruz, who has been very inactive and did not look good in his last fight, fighting an awkward fighter in what was the kid?
Cabrera.
Cabrera. Right, exactly. Thank you.
Gervonta Cabrera.
Champ. Didn't look great in that fight. But he didn't really have a willing dance partner. I think with Romero, he's going to have a willing dance partner. So this looks like it's going to be fireworks. And it's a truly 50-50 fight. I don't know who I really pick in this one.
Does the 140-pound division change anything for Cruz? He's kind of a small guy, right?
He's a small guy anyway. But again, I don't think Rolly's not a big 40-pounder either. He's coming up from 135. I called a couple of his fights at 35, and I've seen him at 140. It doesn't look like his body's changed, like he's really grown into the weight class. He just makes up for it with intensity and his punch. So, but I don't think the size will matter as much in this fight. Esa Cruz is a physical guy either way. But yeah, I really like this fight. I don't know who's going to win, but I'm looking forward to watching it.
George, what do you make of this matchup between Romero and Cruz? We know Romero, to Chris's point, the press conferences are going to be wild because, you know, he's wild like that. So what do you make of this matchup between Romero and Cruz?
I agree with the guys. It's a great fan-friendly fight. And Cruz can be outboxed. And Chris and Paulie, you guys have talked about that. He can be outboxed, but Romero's not that kind of fighter. Romero's got a lot of power. He relies on his power. And Cruz comes forward. So this is a 50-50 fight right now. It's a fan-friendly fight. And this, you know, Amazon Prime, these are the kind of fights they need to make. This is a very, very fan-friendly fight. Even though this morning we thought it was Ryan Garcia and Rolly, things change in boxing. I love the fight. I think it's going to be an action fight, and I'm looking forward to it. But they still should have done better with the main event.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is ProBox TV, your boxing channel. Thanks for watching us here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at ProBox TV. And download the ProBox TV app where apps are available. And for live fights and so much more, visit us at proboxtv.com.